Hello, and welcome to another episode of Walk with Me, the podcast. I am your host, Marie-Eve Bédard, and I'm so happy to be here with you today and to have a conversation with my special guest. Now, if you are new to the podcast, I am going to encourage you to follow the podcast on your favorite platform, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if it is a podcast episode with a guest, then you will find the video version of the podcast on YouTube. So you can also subscribe to my channel there. So thank you so much, Elisabeth, for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Elisabeth, I was actually preparing the podcast, and it's funny because my husband always wants to know, like, who was this person? Where did you meet that person? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, it's one of those things that we have access with social media where we fall in love with somebody's art or somebody's like podcast or somebody's something, like a creator, and then we just start to follow. And time passes and we just don't remember how it all started. But like, I was just really trying to figure out where I started this following you, and I just can't remember. It's just that your art was there somewhere in the ethers and the digital world, and I just found you, and it was really something that touched me deeply because of the themes that you discuss, because of the way that you see the world, because of there's also the fact that you have been an expat for 7 years, and we're going to dive a little bit more into that. But like, there was a lot of things that resonated with me in a very silent way, because like, we did have some conversation, like exchange, but not that much, right? Do
Yeah,
you remember?
I was also trying to find out how we met, and I also couldn't remember, but then I saw the connections with traveling and being an entrepreneur and just sort of molding our life as we are in different phases of our lives. But yeah, so I was like, I understand that we're connected, but I don't know how and when. So it's a
I just
mystery,
love
but it's
it's the
okay.
mystery. It's a mystery, but it's a good mystery. It actually shows that, we say a lot of things about social media and about like the digital thing. There's always two sides, and when it's used to bring like each other like closer in a sense of belonging, in a sense of our experience in the world and our collective memories. And it's funny because I was reading your bio, and that was really the part that I know that kind of like attracted me to you. It's really about our personal experiences, like how we are so unique in the way that we see the world, but at the same time, like, how does it flow in, weave in to this collective that we are all together, like in the present, but also in the past, and like generations. And I just love, love, love the nostalgia that you bring to your art. I just love there's something about your art that is, I'm gonna call it like, so like disruptive, but also soft. There's a softness to the way that you bring things forward. And I just wanted to say, like, I just love, love, love it. So listeners, I'm gonna leave the ways to reach out and see Elisabeth's work in the show note, because I think that she's an artist that is worth the detour and to look into what she does. Now, the first question that I have for you, you're welcome. The first question that I have for you is, like, most artists have a medium that they prefer. And in your case, I'm not sure I know which medium is your preferred one.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's very eclectic. I feel like in the past 3 years, I've been exploring different mediums, but it always comes back to writing is the core. Because to make films, for example, I will often write down a script or the shot list. So that's the base. And then in photography, sometimes it's spontaneous, but if I'm working on an exhibition where each piece has to talk to the other, where there needs to be like a correlation, then I'm also it often comes with a panel of writing a story. um yeah, so writing is the thing I've been doing ever since I'm like 8 years old. I always kept a journal, or um, I did some sort of writing competition that I can remember in primary school. So that was the thing that was the base of everything. Yeah.
Love it. Actually, it's interesting because there's not a lot of people. I do have writings from like that. Writing is also the medium that I love the most. And I have writing from like 7, 8, 9 years old, like, and it's such a privilege to have this access to our like different timelessness. Like there are different versions, basically, like all these identities that we have, like that are ever changing, but at the same time we can see that there's a like a core personality or a core, like there's a little kernel inside of all of that other stuff, around it, that it's so interesting. um I'm curious to know, like, what brought you to, like you just said, like you've been, writing for a long time, but how did you study in arts, like, at all, or
Um,
what's your
yeah,
path a little bit?
yeah. Well, in terms of studies, I studied cinema and communication at first, and then I studied literature. So that, and it was like literature in a sense of studying like other authors, but also having creative writing courses within that program. So um, yeah, so that's my background. But it was honestly, it was a lot of just writing. And the more you write, the more you find your voice. And like you say, like there's such different phases of my writing where I feel like now I'm really happy with how I write. Like I found my mark and my voice. Yeah, I would say since like the past 2 or 3 years, I found it. I don't know, like my style, and yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. So that's actually a really cool thing, because I think that it takes some time to find the like our voice and our style, and at the same time we explore so many things in so many areas, and we see how it lands and how we actually like. I think that, like, for me, the writing medium has like, it's not just pen and paper, like there's so many other like layers, just like, a painter would paint a brush and has different brushes and different colors and different textures and different like types of like paint, but like I think that we think that writing is just pen and paper, but there's so many other layers of it that is unseen, for me anyways, that is unseen, where depending on what we're using it for, like, we do find our voice, but at the same time there's so many like different perspective and angles. Do you feel that? I actually um
Yeah. I mean, for different angles and perspective, what do you mean by that?
well, like you were saying, like when you're doing, like, everything goes from your writing, like you start with the writing, and then that writing goes for a piece, that is a photography, like, and another type of writing is going to be like for social media, or like any, like you have your own Substack as well, like, so your blog, for example, or if you're writing a script, like it's all different, it's all writing, but it's all different
For the
textures and different layers. And people think that just writing is writing, but it's not. And the way that we wield our voice and our talent through the art of writing, it's so different from where you're using it, like where you're channeling it, right? Does it
Yeah.
does it make
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
sense?
yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. So depending on where you write, then your writing is going to be slightly different. But I feel like it is in terms of if it's a script, maybe there's more dialogues, for example, which I haven't done a lot of dialogues things. But yeah, it's different because you have to think in terms of scene, and it's more simplistic, but I guess you'll find your art on how you want the scene to look like, for example, in a film, and how the dialogues are. That's where we're going to see the touch of the artist, or its mark. And then in my subtext, my subtext is always a sort of letter. So to myself, or it's more personal, what I'm going through at the moment, and it's very eclectic, because I'm curious and interested in so many things, and you can see that in my Substack. And if it's for photography, yeah, then I talk about the subject. But my style is like how I write. It has a shape, like it has a form as well, and symbols that are repetitive. I think that's when you find a mark. There's like something that often comes back. For example, right now I'm writing a lot about eggs. Or in my work, the three predominant colors are like dark, bright red, and black and white. And I shoot in terms of photography in black and white a lot. So yeah, I often write about angels as well. Angels, eggs, the number seven. At the moment, these are things that often comes back in my writing. And how I found my mark is, I think it's very important as an artist to discover and look at other people's work. And that's how I started taking, like, oh, I really like this. I don't know why yet, but I really like this from this artist. And somehow I find this in my work and I integrate it in my work. And then I look at this artist and I'm like, this thing that this artist is doing, I really like it. Either the way they write, and then I try and question, what is it about their writing that I love? And somehow we're like sponges, also with friends, and whatever we're surrounded by, it becomes a reality. So in that same way, I feel that's how I started finding my own voice, by taking little bits from different artists and sort of making it my own.
Yeah, it's akin as like, I think that's why I go back always to the painting. Like there's different painting techniques that we can actually really see, but in the writing I think it's more subtle, but it's the same principle, right? Like we get inspiration from different point of view, and it's like a technique or like a way of like arranging the phrases, the tempo, like the sonority of things, and then we just say, oh, I'm so drawn to that. I'm gonna take that technique and make it mine. Like it's not like you're copying like the other person, like it's really like you're making it yours and you're incorporating it as the other techniques that you would use. And I feel like we don't talk enough of this because we don't see all these layers about the writing, and we don't see all these layers about that form of art that it is to write and to yeah. So I just love that you're bringing this and we're actually talking about this together. What happened 3 years ago? What do you think happened, like for you to find your voice? Like that, to feel like you found your voice, like
I think I just started diving into being an artist. Like I always knew that I loved being creative, but I think before I was interested in creating, but I'd say it was more crafting. Like it was um I was more focused on mindfulness, yoga. I did my yoga teacher training when I was 19 or 20. And so up until I was like 26, 27, I was really into that, was my core, like my practice, and what I wanted to learn more about. And then, there was a shift. I don't know exactly what happened, but I remember reading, wanting to start a magazine. That was a thing that I don't know where it came from, but I wanted to start a magazine. So I started being interested in, okay, so there's going to be like a writing sort of section, and then photography. And so I started interviewing all these other artists in New Zealand. I was in New Zealand at the time, and to write pieces about their work which was going to be in that magazine. So by starting to reach out to other artists, then it started inspiring my own wish to do more art. Oh, also another thing was that I during COVID, that's when I studied literature. And then so I had to write and more. So I developed this taste of writing by writing, and by I decided I had to read a lot of books, which I always read, but again, when I was in that like mindfulness and yoga sort of period, and surfing as well was very important for me in those years. I was reading more like self development sort of books, and then yeah, when I studied literature, then I had to read books about other authors, and I also had a class about interdisciplinary work. So, which means mm, you fuse different mediums. So there would be writing and using the body as a medium, let's say. So you write on your body and you take photos. So that's photography, using the body as a medium, and writing. Writing on garments, on clothes. That's another example. So then I started thinking about other medium where I could use writing. And then it just started like that. So studying literature was a turning point, and wanting to start that magazine. Also reading a book which is called Just Kids by Patti Smith. I'm like love Patti Smith, and I just heard about this book and I read it, and it was about her. She's I mean, songwriter, musician, poet in New York. And at the time, she just arrived in New York, I believe from New Jersey, but I could be wrong, from outside New York. Came as an artist. She was like 16, 17, around those that age. And she met Robert, who was a photographer, also the same age. And they fell in love, and they were two sort of starving, typical starting artists in New York. Like they were homeless and sleeping on people's couches, but they just wanted to make art. So they would be writing to each other. And then she met Jimi Hendrix, and then he wanted to record her in his studio. And then Robert was starting to do photography, which was at the time very confronting. It was a lot of like naked bodies, and men exploring. He became a homosexual, and so it was a lot about yeah, naked men posing with a lot of contrast and very much in your face, in terms of genitals and muscles. And yeah, so that sort of really inspired me. And then in New Zealand, I had a partner who, I have to say, inspired me and pushed me a lot into exploring even more medium. So he was a blacksmith, so his specialty was working with metal. So he was making Japanese knives and door handles and sculptures out of metal. And he was like an encyclopedia when it came to artists and music. And he was a poet, so his way of writing also inspired me a lot. And he had a very strong mark on his work. He was a painter, a musician, a songwriter, a poet, a blacksmith. He could do leather work, build anything. So he really expanded my world in many ways. And then I started exploring with pottery. I had a job at a pottery studio, well, in a gallery, doing sort of industrial pottery, so repetitive tiles and repetitive decoration for houses. And so I had a pottery phase, and then I started doing leather work as well. And then I got interested in jewelry, and I started doing, like, I made this ring and that ring. And yeah, so those were the big turning points. Yeah.
I love the exploration of everything. Like I'm a super curious person, like, and I don't think like I don't think that I have started to, even at my age, to actually explore like all the things that are meant to be explored in a creation sense. And it's, I think it stems from the fact that I for long, like for the longest time, I've always loved like art, but I've never like created anything. And um I've always said like I'm not an artist, so I'm not creating. And I like the writing for me was just like that was the way that to channel whatever was going on in my life. I did, write poetry. I did like, but it was not, like it was not to write a book or to like do anything like that. And I remember like one of my friends was like, "What are you talking about? Like, nonsense. You do like so many like creative things, in your life." And I think that we do tend to think that art is like here and like that we're there, and it's not overlapping, when creation is creation. No matter what you're creating, like that is creation. And I have been cooking since like I I'm 6 or 7 years old. Like I've cooked all my life. Like that's my meditation in action. That's my way of creating, like assembling like different flavors, different textures, like all of that. And what she did was she came home to my place one day and she had this it looked like a little tin box, and you open it and there was like little uh round boxes in it, and one was like spices and the other one was like sprinkles. And she was like, "You are an artist. Stop thinking that you're not." And I think that when we're looking at the different identities that we move through into our lives, like we are creating so many things, like, and because we don't think that we're artists or we don't think that we're creative, like we're not exploring. But it's actually like the curiosity that drives the exploration, that drives to the creation, because you get inspired and then you're feeling things. Like there's so many emotions that are there that you want to create something out of it. And for the listeners, if you're actually like, it might land finally, because like I think that we are judgmental, or we're not willing to step into those side of ourselves, that identity of creation that this world needs so much.
Yeah, and I think anything that you put time into, it will happen. You will be an artist if you put time into exploring and into looking at other people's work and wanting to find your mark, and then it's sort of life just sort of, but you just have to have that drive and that willingness. If you're like, I'm kind of, maybe I could be an artist, like you just feel it when that's my direction, that's where I'm going, and it excites me, and that's what I think we do with everything in our lives too. If for you it was like a very strong pull towards cooking or towards anything else, doing podcast, it takes a lot of energy and time to master something, and to be able to do it, just to organize things with people to show up with you, and to organize platforms and appointments, and it's energy that, but you just know you have to do it. And yeah.
Yeah. How did you, because I'm hearing here, I know that, so for you just came back, like there's two really cool things that I wanted to, like three. You just spent 7 years in New Zealand. You just came back to your hometown. So you are like me from Montreal, right? Are you from Montreal, like, or like Montreal?
I was born on the plateau. Yeah,
You were
so
born on the plateau.
so
So, like me, you're from Montreal, French Canadian. You listeners probably hear it in both of our accents. And you've traveled before you actually decided to go to New Zealand. Were you in like, because there's a difference between like traveling, like being a traveler, and being an expat. Was the New Zealand the first expat experience that you've had?
yes,
Yes. Okay.
but I traveled before, so since I was 19 or 20, I went to Europe for the first time by myself. Before, I traveled also in Europe and other places, but with friends, with two girlfriends that we love to travel a lot. But that was the first time that I was like, I want to leave Montreal. don't know where I'm going or for how long, and with a backpack, and kind of, yeah, did that thing. So I left at that point for a year and a half, and I worked for a whole summer in the Canary Islands in Spain, and then another summer in Greece. And in between those, I was just sort of moving around, and I took little jobs in restaurants, in bars, whatever I could find under the table, because it was Europe, obviously. And then I would come back to Montreal thinking, okay, I'm going to work a lot and then go again. And so I went to Costa Rica after, which is where I did my yoga teacher training and learned to surf. And then I met a Canadian guy there, and we fell in love, and he was traveling a lot as well. And then I moved to British Columbia for a summer. And then he was like, I want to move to New Zealand. And at that point, I was kind of tired of moving around. I was like, I really love Vancouver Island. I want to live there, base myself there. But then he wanted to go to New Zealand. I was like, all right, let's go. Let's do it again. So then we took a visa, a working holiday visa. And then, so it's because I know it, like New Zealand was never in my radar. I was never like, this is a place I want to go. Only because he wanted to go. He loved surfing as well. And New Zealand has great surf. So we went there with that in mind. And 7 years later, I
When you left, you
stayed.
didn't know you were. I mean, you left for how long originally? What was in your mind? I'm just
one
always curious.
year.
1 year, and
Yeah.
then what happened?
Well, we actually didn't stay together for very long. So he ended up going back to Canada, and I was like, well, I kind of like it here, and decided to stay. And then I could extend for a second year, extended for a second year, then met someone there, and I could go on a partner visa with that partner. And that's how I got my residency. So I just got my permanent residency in December, a month a month or two ago. And so I could always go back. Um, yeah, so love has been a big drive for me in terms of being there. And now, love again. Since 2003, I've met my partner now who's Colombian. And he just spent 4 months with me in New Zealand. And before that, we were in Mexico and in Colombia. And now I'm moving officially to Colombia next month.
That's pretty
So,
exciting.
yeah, yeah,
So it's a hop and a skip right now in Montreal. Like you just
yeah, exactly. So I'm
was it
just,
strategic because of permits or visas or no?
no, well, I just wanted to come back home, be with my family, kind of recenter a little bit, because it is like I'm still grieving those, I know I could always go back to New Zealand, but it was everything I knew, like my network, my work, my friends, my lifestyle. And coming to Montreal in the middle of the winter is kind of like it hits you. So, but I'm really happy to be in Montreal at the moment, but I don't see myself, I couldn't live, wouldn't want to at the moment live here. But it was, yeah, mainly to see my family and bring a lot of well, I've reduced my belonging as well to like 3 luggages, but to assess what do I bring to Colombia and what do I leave here and this kind of things. And yeah.
You mentioned something about the grieving. There's a there's a I've been through like a lot of grief, like, and I've accompanied people like in their griefs and everything, and like in my, and you tell me if that happens to that happened to you, but in my mind, like there was going to be things that I have to grieve, like by moving here in Germany, but there was layers of grieving that I did not expect at all. And that kind of like threw me off. And like, the first year that we arrived here, it was like the first 6 months, I'm going to say specifically, were very, very challenging. In any change, there's a level of grief. Like in any change, is actually part of the whole process. And I was saying that, there was things that I was prepared, like, of grieving, and the grief starts, because when I was in Canada, we had a house, we had a car, we had like a whole bunch, like a house full of like souvenirs and stuff like that, so there was a process to, sell everything, get rid of everything and whatnot before we came here. And then afterwards, when we arrived here, where there was other, because our relationships are changing, the dynamics are changing, the time zone, which doesn't look like it's a big deal, but it is like a hurdle for people to, like, because we're not on the same time zone. So people have to not only remember that number of time zones separating us, but it's also like, how do we stay connected with the people that we love? Like, so it's all like these things. And I was just about to ask you, like, when you left to go to New Zealand, just to contrast before we actually talk about the return back, what you were referring to, like, what were the things that that were the most challenging for you when you left Montreal to go to New Zealand?
Well, so I left from Vancouver Island to go to New Zealand. So it was kind of similar. Like, even the scenery is very similar. But what was challenging was that the first place that we went to live was literally, it was called Waipu Cove, and it's one street with a restaurant. We were both working in the same restaurant, and then we were living just in front of the sea, like across the street. And the whole town was one street with the restaurant where we worked, and a little convenience store. That's it. So I was missing like a community, which I had in Tofino and Vancouver Island. It was basically just the visitors that would come in and out, some people that lived in this very small area where we lived. And I came there without a car at the beginning. And so I always needed to sort of rely on other people to go to the next town to do groceries, for example, at the beginning. And then, but community was a big thing. So after 2 months, I was like, I really need this to feel like I belong somewhere and build something. So I left, and then I went straight away to, I stopped in a yoga ashram for like 2 weeks or 3 to recenter myself and think, where do I want to go next? Because I knew nothing about New Zealand or where to go. I just heard about some towns, but not much. And at that retreat center, I met this girl who had just gone through a breakup, and she came from Raglan. And I was like, I kind of heard about this because it's like one of the best spots to surf in New Zealand. And I heard there's like a creative community going on, and like a mini Tofino. People said Raglan is like Tofino's sister. And so I was like, okay. So I went there, and I just stayed there ever since for 7 years.
So it was much bigger than the small place that you were at the beginning.
Yeah, well, much bigger is a big word because it was also very small. It's a small town. There was like 2 main roads, and that was that. But, restaurants, enough to have what you need, like 2 grocery shop and an organic grocery shop and little restaurants and venues and shops. But that's it. But you had everything that you need. And it was a community, the people. There's like farmers market, and then there's a repair shop to repair your things, and then a lot of artists and a lot of people that are inclined towards being in the outdoors. And we have a local mountain to go and hike. The surf is amazing. There's beaches and rocks to climb, like rocks that you can go kayaking through. We had crop swaps as well for gardeners. So every time, once a month, we'd all meet. Like maybe there'd be about 50 people, and everyone brings either like seedlings or seeds or things they harvested. And then we just put everything on a table, present everything, flowers as well. And then everyone just takes what they need. And that was really amazing. And an art center and a pottery studio. So Yeah, a lot of people that had time to teach as well, like sewing. I learned to sew in New Zealand. Um, yeah, so it was simple enough, but had so much to offer as well.
Wow, it was actually it's kind of like a slow living little community, right? Like that's what I hear, that through learning and teaching, through bringing it's pretty speaking, like with everybody, once someone brings everything to a table to share and to like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, within like a small pocket of time, you get to know a lot of people. So I remember having one of my best friend, her house burned down during COVID, and everyone was just lining up at her door the next days to give her stuff, and it was just amazing how community comes together. And we have like a notice board for the town as well, where at one stage I had my car broke down, and so I just wrote, can someone come and help me? And then a stranger came and pulled me out, and I don't know, sharing during the pandemic fruits with neighbors, and like, oh, I have a lot of this, what do you have? Or it's very common we have also like a free stand where everyone just puts either food or anything they want to give away. There was a small library as well, which was okay, but great to have books available in such a small town. And yeah, and then you go in the same cafe and there's the same waiters and you get to know them. And if you're into photography, there's a little photography group and a little writing group, and live drawings every Tuesday. So if you go there, then you get to know that group and everyone knows each other. So it's in that way. It's like you go to the grocery shop and you think, I'm just going to get lemons, and then you like bump into someone and then you talk for 30 minutes, and then you cross the street and bump into someone else that you know and talk a little bit. So I really love that aspect of being there and knowing a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I coming from a big city like Montreal, like it's not something that we're necessarily used to, right? Like that level of meshing, like that real like societal mesh that holds us, together, that actually like brings us in. And especially in the pandemic, that must have been really really cool to live through that, the pandemic, because there was so much loneliness. And I think that a lot of people, like you were meant, within 2 months you knew that you can stay where you were at the beginning, because the loneliness it's quite another level of it. It's interesting because I'm an only child. Like I'm used to being alone. Like I love time with myself and everything. But like when you are in another country, in a foreign country as an expat, and you're in between, your past life and like building this new life, like there's another aspect of loneliness that was really interesting for me to sit with, I'm gonna say.
Yeah, because how long have you been in Germany for now?
It's been a little over 3 years. But the thing is, it would have been like, first of all, like we live in a small village, like we're around 800 souls here. Like the point was to come in because the Black Forest is like that was the whole point, to go live in the forest. But at the same time, like it's like for us too, we have to have a car, otherwise like it takes an hour to go to town, right? Like by foot, and you have to go over the mountain to go do your whatever thing. But at the same time, like when you arrive in small villages, like here, like we were strangers, right? Like there's this small village, like people are born here, they're raised here, and they die here basically. So you coming in a small village, it's quite something, like where people are kind of weary, like they're observing, like we were kind of like under observation. And there's something that happened one day. My husband came back from walking the dogs, and he's like, "There's one of the goats that are not it's not going well." And I'm like, "Oh, what's happening?" So I went out, and clearly it was in distress. And I didn't know, like it was maybe like 6-7 months after we moved here. I didn't know like who the goats belonged to, like with the neighbors. And then I'm like going on doors, like knocking on doors of my neighbors saying, hi, like, is there somebody like there? And then when all of a sudden, like, one person opened the door, and I was like, there was a goat. And in my like broken German, because that's the thing, you know, like if it would have been like a English speaking country, I think it would have been faster, right? But because of the language barrier, because like German is not an easy language to learn, and so anyway, so I'm there in front of her, and I actually explained to her that there's one of the goats that is not doing well, and she's like, "Okay, I'm going to call the owners of the goats right away." And I said, "I'm so sorry, I need to go to work. Like, I'm so sorry to just leave you with this." And she's like, "No problem." That day changed everything. That day, we became part of the community because they actually saw that we were looking after each other. And that is actually interesting when we think about, you know, I know that my dad had a house like 25 years on the same street, you know, and I barely knew my neighbors. I barely knew them like 25 years. And here, like after 6, 7 months, just because of that tiny little, we're looking after each other, it just switched everything. And now like we're part of the community. Like we go like to like we're invited like New Year's Eve and whatnot. That was actually like really interesting to live for me. That smaller, you know, that smaller meshing weaving that you're speaking about, and that helps, you know, because your art has a lot of influences of different cultures.
Yeah.
Just because you have like, first of all, you've traveled in different areas. You've done a lot of collaboration with different artists from different places and whatnot. How is your expat experience transpiring in your art? How much of it do you think has?
I mean, so expat would be my life in New Zealand, which is where I develop my voice or myself as an artist. I think there's maybe, is there some projects? I mean, I did a lot of projects with people in my community in New Zealand. So in that way, like the first exhibition I did, which was called Geodynamic Slumbers, was about, I interviewed 6 couples in Raglan, where I used to live, people that I knew, and about their time in bed. So I asked them in the morning to leave their beds undone, and I came to take a photo of like the sheets. And because to me, like one morning I woke up and I was looking at me in my partner's bed, and I thought he always sleeps with his feet like hanging out of the bed, and we always drink coffee in bed in the morning, so there's like stains a little bit on the sheets, and then all of the blanket, his pillow is like lower, and then I always steal the covers, so all the covers were sort of on my side. And I thought that was interesting how it like the shape of the sheet could express a story. So I was interested to hear about other people's experience in bed. So I took this picture, and then I interviewed them about that morning about their dreams, sex, things they talked about that night before, how they felt, did they sleep well or not, just the night before. And yeah, so in that way, you know, community was very important for me to be able to do that work. And the next one that I did, cold-blooded dermatographic locutions. I also interviewed there, I think it was 6 people, and asked them about words that they were told that sort of stayed even after the passage of time, like in their head. And I wrote them repetitively on their bodies and then took photos to show that we carry those words, although if we look at someone, we don't see that. So it was just an opportunity to show that physically. And so again, like I needed people that trusted me and people that would, show me this very vulnerable side of themselves to be able to bring this project to life. So in that way, my expat life there allowed me to do that. I would say that in New Zealand as well, because it is a smaller community, it was great to start as an artist because there's not that many artists, and like news, for example, is often about, I don't know, accidents on the road, whether a sheep has escaped or things like that. So if you do something a little bit different, or there's more space to have exposure. And I worked at um the art center of my town. So I was doing event coordinating and film festival coordination and art administration. And I had to go and report our events at the center at our local radio. And I had to work with the local paper. And then when it came my time to do things, and I already knew those people. And so yeah, in that way, that transpires in my work. Some pieces of writing are also about my time and experience in New Zealand. A trilogy that I'm currently working on starts with the protagonist being in New Zealand and going to Argentina, but that's the start. So and then if we talk not about my expat life, but just all the travels that I'm doing, that's a very big part of my life, to travel. It's important because for me personally, a good artist is someone with imagination, someone that says something fresh, new, either in the way they place words or in the symbols that they bring, or yeah, something that you're like, I haven't seen that before, or it's interesting or something. um so when I travel, my imagination like widens, because there's new culture and new symbols and new patterns of colors or words that emerge and that I can bring into my art. So um yeah, I think a lot of things that are what we say is exotic is something that's out of what we see in our daily lives, and that's what personally excites me. If I read about like traditions in Bulgaria, I have no idea, and that excites me because it's something new and fresh. And yeah, so I think that's how my art transpires in no, my travels transpires in my art.
Into your art. Do you feel like your travels, what's the filter? Are you like, is your experiences going through the filter of yourself, or do you feel like you are as a person going through the filters of your experiences?
Wait, so am I going through the filter of my experiences, or are the experiences going through my filter?
Yeah. How do you feel?
um
Like,
I don't know.
I'll let you just, but for me, like, because when we are more static and we read on things that we haven't experienced, then the external information goes through our filter, right? And the more that we experience them in real time, or the more that we travel, the more that we widen. I feel for me that there's a shift that happens where the thing, I'm not the filter. I'm actually being filtered through the experience. And I'm just curious to see, like, how do you feel about that in your own life?
Yeah, well, I think that my filter, which is myself, is built upon those experiences. So, yeah, I don't think that I was born a certain way and that's my filter. My filter becomes what's around me. And so it's always sort of an addition. I don't know if I'm answering right, but all the experiences have made my filter or my core or my mark as an artist. And so then I travel with this filter, and then I go and experience more, and then it just adds upon my filter. So it's sort of a cycle of keeping the filter going and the core expanding. But I write a lot of all of my work is mostly based on my own experiences in the world. And then I like to question others about that same specific subject. Um, but a lot of my writing is very personal as well. So when I put myself in another environment, then I have something to say, because I find if I just stay here, well, I have now a lot of past experiences I could still write and write and write about, but it it is important for me to go somewhere else, and then suddenly there's like these whole things that are happening that are interesting to me, that so now I have something fresh to talk about.
Love it. It's like a dynamic process of ever changing, both with the medium, with the person, with the environment, but still it's like that kernel that I was talking about, like we are like a little kernel, but then like there's all these little things that we go through, that we add, that we let go, that we ever change ourselves. Speaking of let go, I want to go back to the grieving part, where you're saying that after 7 years leaving New Zealand, where you've been there for like 7 years is a long time, like with all your life and all your roots basically that you've built there, now you're experiencing like a grieving basically. How do you, like, what's coming up more at the moment for you?
Yeah, missing this everything that I named about my lifestyle, and friends that I could just rock up to. I don't need to tell them I'm coming or arrange a meeting, which I find is more of a thing here. But obviously, I've just come back here, and it takes time to have friendships that they're just like, yeah, come over whenever. Just open the door, it's open, And so I miss that. I miss going for a surf with my very dear girlfriends, like early morning for sunrise and just being in the water. When I managed to wake up early, I'm like, that was worth it. That's great. Um, yeah, and one of them is having a small baby. She's just one, and I miss seeing that, being around them. And yeah, and I know, like, I was comforting myself when I was leaving New Zealand. I was like, everything this was like a model that I've discovered that I liked, that those things are important for me to have in my life, like this sort of community and friends that are sort of have similar thinking. And there's a lot of immigrants in that town, actually, because everyone's kind of drawn to like the lifestyle there. So I left thinking, I'm going to replicate this somewhere else. Like, I believe that I have this internal world that I just carry with me wherever I go. And some environments are more, inspiring, or I feel that I can belong best when they are similar to where I lived, or similar to my experience when I was in Tofino on Vancouver Island. I found those same quality of like very strong community, a lot of people knowing each other, a lot of people that are growing their own food. Those sort of aspects are really important, are favorable. I want to live in a place like that. So in Colombia, I don't know yet, but this is definitely something I'm looking for. And ideally, what we would like is to have a base in Canada and also in Colombia, and sort of be between the two. So in Canada, I started thinking about Nova Scotia. I kept seeing, we did one last little road trip with my partner in New Zealand before leaving, and we went into this town. We were on Nova Scotia Drive, and then I go into this shop and I find this little trinket that says Nova Scotia. And I've been thinking about Nova Scotia for a while, and I've actually never been there. But I know some people in Nova Scotia, and there's like little towns that are similar to what I'm looking for. So that's another mission on my list, is to go and explore there, and to be close to the ocean, and to be creative and all of that. So we'll see in Colombia where that's going to be. I have no idea.
It speaks to me because I actually did pass through like a few days in Nova Scotia, and I really liked the vibe. And we're planning on maybe going to Canada like this year, my husband and I, but like we don't want to stay the entire time like in Montreal. And I was like, well, maybe we can do a hop and a skip in Nova Scotia. Because I don't know if we're ever going to go back to Canada. I don't know, and I don't want to plan anything anyways. But I do feel like if we go back to Canada, it's going to be something close to the ocean. My husband is a very big ocean person, and I think that as much as he loves the mountains here, I think that part he misses a lot. So that's actually, I resonate with what you just said about the Nova Scotia. I had one last question, and it actually is, what's next? What's the next project?
Well, yeah, my focus now is so we're going to be based in Cali in Colombia. So that's definitely where my energy is going, is to starting to feel into that and in that life that we're wanting to build over there. And then we'll start to, little by little, we're not in a rush, but to explore other areas in Colombia until we find this little sort of village that feels right to be based in. And then the plan artistically, I'm working on two main things, like main projects at the moment. So the trilogy that I was telling you about. So when I'm in Colombia, that's my goal, is to finish that trilogy. And my partner is also a writer, and he's working on a book as well. So we're wanting to both sort of work on our books at the same time while we're there. And then the other project is a project that we started in Mexico last year. We interviewed Emilio El Indio Fernandez. I mean, not him, his family. He's dead now. He was a prominent figure he was a film director in the 70s, and he was in the same circle as like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera and Juan Rulfo, who's a writer as well. And that was in Mexico City. So we went to his house and ended up talking with his family, and then ended up thinking that's very interesting. Because this house was built to be a film set. So it's this massive, massive house. And there was around 160 films that were made there. Marilyn Monroe also stayed with him. And so, and his house is like a museum. There's all these like very special objects that he collected over time. And yeah, and his family told us many stories that happened in the house, which we thought was quite interesting. And so we decided to remake scenes that happened in that house in a sort of theatrical ways, and like remaking them and taking photographs. And also each photograph is going to come with a panel of writing that tells a story. And that led us to another Mexican artist. Her name is Chavela Vargas. She was a singer and not songwriter, singer, mainly musician, also very predominant in the 70s in that same area. And because one of the daughter of Emilio spent some time with Chavela, and somehow, I don't know, we ended up same thing in the house where she used to live, meeting her best friends, her producers. And then there's another story again with photographs. So we're mounting this exhibition and wanting to propose it to, like, send a proposal to museums, because we're thinking that's like a really sort of big sort of global project. So that's the two main projects that I'm working on at the moment.
That's very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Elisabeth, thank you so much. This is so exciting. I'm very happy that you came and that you moved through all the hurdles of this technical stuff with me, and also to share your I just love how you have this way of seeing the delicate in the ground. Like, that's what I have like in mind, like with there's always a pulsation between like the small and the big with what I see from your work, and that actually really speaks to me in different ways, and I just love it, and I can't wait to see what you're coming soon with, and I wish you all the best for the next step of this journey to Colombia, and I will leave all in the show notes. I will leave all the links to follow you for the listeners.
Thank you so much as well for this. I feel like it's through conversations that we also get to know ourselves, and through the other that we also, again, that circle of taking little pieces of everyone who's around us. So it's been really nourishing and nice to be with you this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's one of the main things of the podcast, and to have the guests over. It's that exactly, like to have the discussion and to just, bounce back ideas, point of views. And I'm so blessed to be able to use that medium in my work. So thank you so much. Listeners, I thank you for being with us today. I am sending you so much love. I see you, I hear you, and I feel you. Take care.